Namaste. Once again, I come back with new lesson of Grade 10 Social Studies. And today's lesson is Ordinance. Most of the students of Grade 10 ask me the questions of Ordinance frequently. So today I'm going to clear the queries and questions of Ordinance to the students of Grade 10. And this video is very useful for the students of Grade 10 because Ordinance is a very complex uh, subject to them because it is associated with constitution and constitutional matters. So uh, let me say today's important points which I will be talking in this class. Highlights of the presentation. I will be talking definitions of ordinance, constitutional provision in the context of Nepal, circumstance and decisions. So, under definitions of ordinance, I will be talking what is ordinance, what is the concept of ordinance, constitutional provision, in the Constitution of Nepal 2072, what provisions are made for ordinance? Circumstance means in which situation ordinance has to be brought, and decision, who will take the decision to promulgate the ordinance. The next slide is of definitions of ordinance. Ordinance is a temporary law promulgated by the President on the recommendations of the Councils of Ministers. So, student, don't be upset. Don't be upset and don't get confused in this uh, definition. They may be in dilemma because how is law made by the president on the recommendations of the councils of ministers as they have been taught by their teachers. Legislature is a law-making organ of the state. Yes, in democratic nations there are three organs: legislature, executive and judiciary, and constitutionally they have different functions and powers. So ordinance is a temporary law made by the executive, so it is not made by the legislature. If it is made by the legislature, it is a law, it is not an ordinance. Ordinance is prepared by the executive. So president can make it when both the houses of the parliament are not in session, or any of the houses, either the house of representatives or national assembly is not in session. I am talking about the constitutional provisions of ordinance in the context of Nepal. And we know the parliament of Nepal is bicameral in nature. Bicameral means a parliament having two houses, house of representatives and national assembly in the context of Nepal. One in this definition, students are definitely in dilemma. President can make it when both the houses of the parliament are not in session. It means what? Session means a time or period of having regular meetings of the parliament. If we talk about the sessions in the context of Nepal, Parliament of Nepal has not made any sessions yet. If we see the neighboring country India, India has said, or Parliament of India has said, three sessions. The first sessions of the Parliament in India begins from the month of February, and it will remain until the month of May. Second sessions of Indian Parliament begins from the month of July, and it remains until the month of September. And the last sessions of Indian Parliament is called winter session. And this winter sessions is in the month of November and December. Indian Parliament has set three sessions. But in the context of Nepal, Parliament has not fixed its session. So session means a time or period of having the meetings of the parliament. The value or impact of this ordinance is equal to act made by the parliament. There is no difference between the ordinance and a law made by the parliament. Both of them are of equal uh, are of equal power. There is no difference between the ordinance and the law. Their impact, their value are same. Although ordinance is made by the executive and law is made by the parliament, there is no difference in terms of their impact on the activities of the states. It is not the subordinate law. Subordinate law means we don't think that it is smaller than the law made by the legislature. It is a democratic nation, and in the democratic nations, we see the principle of check and balance among the three organs: legislature, executive, and judiciary. So it is maintained appropriately by the constitution. So ordinance is called or should be treated as an emergency power. It can be used to deal unanticipated and emergency problems. So ordinance is not made regularly by the executive, or is not made by the president on the recommendations of the councils of ministers frequently. It is an occasional law uh, brought by the presidents on the advice of councils of ministers. So it has to be brought by the executive to deal with unanticipated and emergency problems, and when the sessions of the parliament is not in operation. So when the parliament is in session, there is no need for the executive to promulgate the ordinance. So in the second slide, it is a temporary law, as I have already gone through about it. And right now many of the students are curious, and there is a curiosity to know whether the ordinance can be made permanent or not. Yes, obviously it is the rights of the students, it is the wish of the students to know that ordinance can be made permanent or not. It can be made permanent. And how can ordinance be permanent? Ordinance can be made permanent um, by the parliament. When the parliament starts its functioning, ordinance has to be submitted by the executive in the parliament for approval. If parliament finds the ordinance is really useful for the nation, it can be used for the future purpose, when parliament passes it. If both the houses of the parliament pass ordinance, it becomes a permanent law of the nation. If parliament finds the law or finds this ordinance it's not suitable, it's no more suitable for the nations, parliament does not pass this ordinance. And when parliament does not pass this ordinance, it cannot be made a permanent law. So to make it permanent or temporary, this authority lies only in the hands of parliament. Why? There is a question. There is a check and balance. Yes, executive is given authority to make ordinance constitutionally. It does it in the nation when nation is in the need of ordinance, and when executive makes ordinance to overcome the unanticipated, unexpected, accidental circumstances arising in the nation, there is the solution through ordinance. But ordinance cannot be made permanent by the executive itself. in order to make it permanent, there must be the support of the parliament, and parliament makes it either temporary or permanent. So it is a principle of check and balance. So president can withdraw this ordinance anytime. Yes, as per the wish of president, president can withdraw this ordinance at any time. Unless parliament passes, unless parliament passes the temporary law, it cannot become a permanent law or it becomes void. Yes, I have already gone through this statement. If parliament does not pass this temporary law, it cannot become a permanent law of the nation. And if the both houses of the parliament pass a resolutions of its approval, it becomes permanent law. Yes, both the houses of the parliament means I'm talking in the context of Nepal, and the legislature of Nepal is bicameral in nature. So both the houses should agree to pass this ordinance in order to make it permanent. So automatically lapsed after 60 days since the sessions of the parliament begins. Yes, if parliament neither accepts it nor rejects it, it will be automatically useless after the 60 days since the sessions of the parliament begins. So next slide includes its constitutional provisions. There is a provisions of ordinance in the Constitution of Nepal 2072, and we see ordinance in most of the democratic nations in the world. And in Nepal, ordinance mm, uh, in the Constitution of Nepal 2072, ordinance is included in Article 114. So even the executive has also the right to prepare the law in accordance to the present constitution. Yes, it is the constitutional authority for the executive to pass the ordinance to meet the certain requirements, and this provision comes under the check and balance principle, and this is occasional, not regular like the legislature. Students, one thing you have to understand is that it is occasional law. It is not a regular law like the laws made by the legislature, because legislature is the formulator of new laws. It is not the executive that is the formulator of the laws. But in such a certain circumstances, executive is given authority to make it. So but executive does not make this law regularly. Only in the exceptional cases president can bring the ordinance to overcome with accidental circumstances. Already I have talked about it. Now uh, the next slide is circumstance. Circumstance means in which situations ordinance is made. When both the houses of the legislature are not in operation, President on the recommendations of councils of ministers can bring the ordinance. I have mentioned on the recommendations of the councils of ministers, on the advice of the councils of ministers, on the suggestions of the councils of ministers. Why does not president bring it himself or herself? Because in the context of Nepal, president is not the executive head of the state. President is the head of the state, but president is not the head of the rule of the state. So even either the House of Representatives or National Assembly is not in operation, it can also be brought. And the decisions, uh, decision is taken by the councils of ministers in order to bring the ordinance. There is a serious discussion between the president and the councils of ministers in order to bring this ordinance. Without the discussions between the presidents and councils of ministers, it cannot be brought, it cannot be promulgated. So although president is not the executive head of the state, but constitution has given authority to the president to promulgate it after taking the suggestions and recommendations from the councils of ministers, and president cannot make it as per his or her own wish. He or she does it only on advice of councils of ministers. It is not discretionary. Yes, it is not discretionary means it is not the self decisions of the presidents to promulgate the the ordinance. thank you for watching this video.